Today, what we're going to do is a new series, if you will, for this podcast. And I'll think of an official title, I promise. But for now, we're going to call it the Spotlight Series, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to spotlight really great people who are doing some awesome things in the world of education for our students, both directly and indirectly. And today we're going to touch on a person who's doing a lot for our students indirectly. And his name is Dr. Justin Baeder. And Justin has been coming up on my TikTok feed, really quite a few of my social feeds, and some really cool stuff, some really good things he's got going on. And what he talks about and who he helps is actually the administrator. So primarily, I believe the secondary administrator become a better leader. And he himself was a principal. I'm not going to too much of his background, but he was a principal, and now I think he does this full time, where he helps leaders in many different facets. His site has a whole bunch of different downloads, different programs you can join. He's an author, I think, of 2 books, I believe. Either way, some really, really cool stuff. So what we're going to do today is we're going to actually take a listen to one of his videos, and we're going to just talk about it a little bit. Definitely follow him. Definitely check it out. So let's go take a look at what he's got to say today.
As educators, we need to stop letting therapists tell us how to do our jobs. And we need to recognize that being a therapist and being a teacher or an administrator are very different jobs. And if we try to run education the way that therapists want us to, based on how they work individually with their clients, we're going to end up with some pretty bizarre results, like we're seeing with student behavior. And I didn't quite understand exactly what was happening until I came across this article today from Education Next, which is an extensive kind of overview of Ross Greene and Stuart Ablon's work on collaborative problem solving and some related programs. And it's the idea that as a teacher, you should essentially be a psychologist. You should work one-on-one with the student to help them work through whatever issue they're dealing with. And I have to wonder if the people who are coming up with these approaches have ever actually been in a classroom or been a parent or tried to teach a lesson. Like, when would you have the time and opportunity to do this type of thing? And why would you not think, hey, maybe the counselor should be the one to do this kind of thing with students? But this one really blew my mind. They give an example of when a student walks into class 10 minutes late and cusses in front of the class and just disrupts everything and clearly is kind of out of control and needs to not have the opportunity to disrupt the class. Guess what they propose doing here? The proposal is not to have the counselor talk to the student or have an administrator talk to the student, but to have the teacher sit down with the student, have somebody else cover the class and have the teacher sit down with the student and figure out what's going on, with the assumption that it wasn't just a personal choice to make a bad decision and do something disruptive, but that it was something that was kind of outside the student's control, that they need help regulating, or they need help dealing with something that's not really a choice in terms of their behavior. And I think with therapists in particular, I'm seeing this pattern of removing students' locus of control and saying students have no control over their behavior. It's always something else going on that they just don't have any control over. And of course, that makes it pointless to have any kind of rules or consequences because, well, they can't help it. What are you going to do? You just have to listen and be there for them and sit down with them and give them time. And there are all these things that are basically coddling students and enabling students to behave worse and worse and worse that are coming from therapists. And I don't really understand that from the perspective of somebody who cares about kids. Like, if you're a therapist and you care about kids, why would you want to enable them? Why would you want to coddle them? Why would you want them to think that they don't have any control over their behavior? Why would you want the adults around them to blame themselves for the struggles of the individual student? Like, how does any of that help the individual student, just even as a therapist? Now, of course, we're not therapists. As educators, this is way outside of our lane, way outside of our training. And I just think we really have to push back against Ross Greene and these psychologists who are trying to get us to do their jobs in the classroom. Let me know what you think.
Ross Greene, how dare you? So, I'm joking. I don't even know who that is, but cool, right? Really, really interesting stuff. So let's dig into that a little bit, that one video. Now, Justin has awesome videos that goes into so many different areas. And the reason why we're doing this specifically today is because we're just starting the year, right? It's the first or second week of school for many of us, maybe the first, third or fourth week for certain parts of the country. And we're just trying to really get a lot of different things set, a lot of different routines, a lot of different boundaries, a lot of different processes set. You may be in a new building. You may be have a new administrator. You may have different policies that are happening about sending kids to the office or whatever. So you may be dealing with a lot of different things right now, and that could be tricky and overwhelming. So when we talk about something that Justin just talked about, and he made this, vocal that he was really not in favor of psychologists trying to, have teachers do their job for them, which I totally agree. And I agree with so much of what he said there. The fact that we see so much coddling happening to our students is not empowering them. One of the reasons why, I think as an older millennial myself, we really, I think we're the beginning generations of the 8th place trophies, right? Everybody gets a trophy, and that's like, it's the same thing as, it's coddling. I mean, it's the same thing as setting, having no boundaries, or setting the idea that students are not in control of their behavior because it's some outside influence and we have to work through it with them and blah, 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 blah. Totally agree with that as well. But at the end of the day, my stance on decision making. It is their decision to act out in a way they've acted out. It may be impulsive because they may be 14, they may be 15. I get it, but it's still, they have the ability to choose a new decision or a different decision for that matter. So saying that they're completely out of their control is just, it's saddening that that's even a real thing, because again, we're not empowering our students. You want to talk about providing a better mental health resource for them? Well, then hold them accountable. Accountability. You can package it however you want. You can make it pretty with a bow on top, but you still have to hold them accountable, and at the same time work through what they're doing. To have this, I would love to read the article, to have a teacher, clearly they've never been in the classroom because I can think of some of my experiences, have a teacher step out of the class and have a conversation with a student, and have somebody cover the class every time a student is either cursing or disrupting in class, is ludicrous. Nothing would ever get done ever. Now, granted, if you are a seasoned and good teacher, those instances will happen less and less and less. But I mean, the second kids see that and that's your routine, okay, everything stops. We got to talk about, like, they're gonna eat that up. They don't want to do work. Let's throw a riot. Let's do something. We'll have Johnny step outside for 10 minutes. We'll have a 10-minute break. Like, it's ridiculous. Either way. Now, one thing I did think was interesting where Justin said, what is the therapist for? Like, what do we have psychologists for in schools? Totally agree with that. Now, here's my question to you. Could you remember your high school psychologist's name? Nope. I don't even think I've ever talked to them once. Now, this is almost 20 years ago I went to high school, but still, I can't remember the name. I've never met them. I have no idea who they were. The relationship that a teacher has with a student is light years more powerful than a psychologist. So, with that being said, again, totally agree with Justin's point where, like, what time do you expect us as teachers to have this conversation? Here's where it's the job of the administrator to have the perspective and the policy of, like, okay, what is the time? Well, you probably have zero time as a teacher, but if you can find time, that's great. That's the idea where you want to have that happen. If it's, you have you get to keep the student 5 minutes after class and go late to the next class. Now, don't do that too often because the next teacher will hate you. Or if it's a class that you know that student's really excelling in, and it's okay once in a great, huge while to like, okay, be late 5 minutes, whatever. Maybe that you know that student has fifth period lunch and you are passing by the cafeteria at the end of it and just be like, hey, like, it's totally up to you. If you can do that, I think that would be great. But again, to his point, like, we can't hold teachers accountable to do two jobs. They're here to teach. They're not necessarily here to be a therapist. And again, with that being said, everybody that you're listening to the show right now, you have gotten to teaching because you want to. It's not that you like, oh, I really want to make sure every student knows the Pythagorean theorem. That's my goal in life. No, it's not. You want to be a teacher because you want to mold kids. You want to shape them and grow them into great human beings. You love kids. You love working with kids. It's not always just the content. Now, as a music teacher myself, yes, of course, I love music. I'm a musician. I will always be a musician. That was a secondary career as I was teaching. But it's tricky. So that is my spotlight today. That's my spotlight series on Dr. Justin Baeder. Really cool dude. If you follow him, what I would do is share this clip with him or share this episode with him and say, hey, you need to be a guest on this podcast. That's the next step for these spotlight series. Yeah. Cool. So thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you like it, then hit like, hit subscribe, and hit the bell notification to be notified every time I release a new video. And if you like today's episode, then I think you'll also like this one right over here.